Now let's look at 1 Corinthians 14, 33 through 40, because this is where people claim that there is a contradiction between 1 Corinthians 11 and 1 Corinthians 14. So let's go there and take a look. So we were in 1 Corinthians 11, 12, 13, 14, and we want to look at verses 33 through 40. So now, whether this portion of verse 33 goes with what comes next or what comes before, it really doesn't matter because it's all part of the same thought. And the same thought is orderly worship, because God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace. And so this has to do with orderly worship in the church, and whether it says, as in all the churches before, as in all the churches after, the principle is, as in all the churches for all of this, for orderly worship. So as in all the churches of the saints, so as in all of the assemblies of those who are believers, or who have been made holy by Jesus Christ, the women should keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission, as the law also says. If there's anything they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. And that word shameful is, there you go again, ice cross. And so it is something that is deformed, something that is strictly shameful, something that is indecent or dishonorable or vile. So this is, again, a strong word against it. It is shameful for a woman to speak in the assembly, to speak in the assembly. So this just means to talk, to speak, to make an utterance. Or was it from you that the word of God came? Or are you the only ones it has reached? So now again, we're dealing with generalities. If anyone thinks that he is a prophet or spiritual, or if any woman thinks that she is a prophetess or extra spiritual, then that person should acknowledge that the things I'm writing to you are a command of the Lord. What's a command of the Lord? That as in all of the assemblies of believers, women should keep silent in the assembly, for they are not permitted to speak, but to be in submission. So now remember, we had that bridge that Paul was talking about between Christ and the church and the husband and the wife. And now we have this, the other side of the bridge, where now we have the women generally are supposed to be in submission generally and are not supposed to speak up in the church generally. So apparently there's some context in which women can speak, but not generally or authoritatively. And if they want to know what's going on, if they want to learn anything, they need to ask their husbands at home. So it strikes me that a lot of people make the argument that this has to do then with women who sat on this side and men who sat on this side, and women would have a question and they would yell a question to their husband and it would become chaos and everything else. Well, no, that's not the case. It doesn't have anything to do with just disorder in the seating arrangement, but the fact that it's in all the churches that women are to keep silent in the churches. They're not permitted to speak, but should be in submission. Not should not disrupt the service. But the idea here is that they are to be in submission. As they're in submission everywhere else, they're to be submission in the general congregation of the church. So it has to do with submission, not being boisterous at the wrong time. All right, so continuing on, this is a command of the Lord. If anyone does not recognize this, then he is not recognized. So, my brothers, earnestly desire to prophesy and do not forbid speaking in tongues, but all things should be done decently and in order, properly, fittingly, becomingly. So there again, we have propriety at home, things that are fitting in the Lord, and here again in public worship, there are things that are fitting in the Lord, and both of which, one aspect of it is that women are to be in submission. So how could a woman be a pastor and remain silent in the church and be in submission? So not only does it disrupt the household order, but it also disrupts the church order as well. All right, so let's get back and look at some general notes here. So peace is as defined by God, and the topic under discussion is applicable as in all the churches of the saints, along with the accompanying general language which addresses the women in the churches. So this is all general language. And the declaration is very clear. The women are to keep silent because they are not permitted to speak, but are to subject themselves per the law. So verse 34 there. It is not that they are to be subjected, but that they are to subject themselves. They should be in submission, to subject themselves. So it shouldn't be that men should have to force this to happen. It should be that women do so willingly. They are to take the action and receive the effect of the action, and probably some affection too. All right, so this subjection is to be voluntary, not coerced or forced, and it is the duty, it is fitting, it is proper in the Lord to do this. The law, which is not socially or geographically dependent, also supports this. The household order bears on congregational order in that the wife is to follow up on the questions that she has at home by asking her husband. All right, so there again, we have consistency across the board. And then reinforcing verse 34 that it is improper for a woman to speak in church. So here again, the Greek word is iskros, meaning filthy, base, or dishonorable. Improper is a softening of the language by the translators of the ESV. But it's a strong word. So the notion of propriety as defined by God is an overarching principle for the context of the assembly or the church. And then in verse 40, rather than improperly, everything must be done properly and in an orderly manner. And so that means that a woman speaking in church is improper and disorderly. So there's no way of getting around this. And then in verses 36 through 38, again, these verses hammer home the authoritative tone and the pervasive applicability of this doctrine. So on the basis of Orthodox teaching, longstanding practice, and ecclesiastical ubiquity, that means everywhere where there's an assembly, this is the rule. So Paul says that anyone having or claiming to have God's influence working in them will speak in agreement or else prove themselves to be false. So you see that in verses 37 through 38. Verse 39, one plausible interpretation here again is that Paul permits women to speak during a certain part of the service that's formatted for open sharing. So that would be praying, prophesying, speaking in tongues, that sort of thing. But when it comes to the time for the authoritative preaching of the word, the authoritative interpretation of the word, the authoritative application of the word, then that would be reserved for the elders or the men of the church. And so in verse 29, we didn't read it, but it says, let some speak and let others pass judgment. So then in verse 33 and following, the passing judgment would be the authoritative teaching that hashes everything out. So whether we agree with this or not, it's at least true that the woman's role is reserved from authoritative teaching or publicly judging what is being said. And so there again, that's at least at the root, it's unmistakable. And then in verse 40, Paul makes a general statement that all things must be done properly and in an orderly manner. So you have, again, that universal expectation of Christian propriety in view for all of the congregations.